Hello, guys. Welcome back to another edition of the I'm Always Right Sports podcast. I am your host, as always, the Mouth of Michigan, Rob Mendyka, and I have an extremely special treat for you guys today on the 2-year anniversary of the I'm Always Right Sports podcast. I have, a mentor, somebody that I looked up to. He was a teacher of mine in high school. It's been a little while since we've talked, but I could not be more excited to have him on here. He is also the head varsity baseball coach for Lamphere High School, my alma mater. He is a football coach. He's been a basketball coach. He's done a little bit of everything, and he's also the person who got me into podcasting. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Adam Wooley to the show. Adam, welcome. I'm going to call you Mr. Wooley because I feel weird calling you Adam. I just said it, and it felt so weird. I went, nope, it's Mr. Wooley.
Adam's fine, whatever. We can make it work. Yeah. I'm just smiling, Rob, because it's not been that long since you've been out, and to sit here and think that you're on your 2-year anniversary. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you and everybody else involved in the show, and I think it's great because I don't want to call it irony. I guess the fitting title of your program, I'm always right. Just reminds me of when you were on the Shot Clock show back in high school, and you were dug in. You dug in on Matt Stafford, and I'm sure you're still there.
Absolutely, 100%. It's not been as easy this year, but nonetheless.
I just want to see this thing unfold tonight and see where it goes with us. So, now that I don't have the power of grading you, I'm kind of a little bit like,
Thankfully, we're fans of quite a few of the same teams, so I think it's going to work out okay. Normally when we have coaches on like you, it's one of those things where we really get into we delve into the school in Lamphere, and we're going to do that. But I wanted to really expand with you because I look at you as a sports intellectual equal in a lot of regards because of the fact that I learned a lot about why people do the things that they do, not just from where we're at now with podcasting and stuff, but from the sports aspect. I mean, when I went to high school and I was a freshman, I just looked at you and I was like, I don't know if I could play for that guy because you were, it was just one of those things to where even I would see you in a gym class or I'd see you and I'd just be like, wow, he is intense. And I don't actually know if the first time I ever actually had a conversation with you was I was a JV football player. And you wanted someone to go get a camera on top of the skybox there, and nobody was really volunteering to go. And you went, okay, I guess that means none of you guys want to play varsity football. And then we all ran up to the top of the skybox to go grab the camera. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, that was Coach Wooley. Man, he was really serious.
Well, welcome, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. But then obviously I got to know you. I was your co-op my senior year, which was a great experience. But so that's just a little bit of background for the people who are listening about us, but let's just jump right into it here. I want to talk to you first and foremost. We'll get to Lamphere here in the back half of this, but I want to talk about Michigan football a little bit because I think that is the first thing that I think when I follow you on Twitter and I see that is the thing I think that you're talking the most about. If you're talking about sports, at least right now, the Lions are dumpster fire. It's fine. You're a Steelers fan, so you're living in all your glory, but with Michigan football, that's one thing that we have.
Let everybody know too. As a longtime Steelers fan, this is not.
That is true. Yeah, no, he's not a bandwagoner. When I was in high school, he was still like, you need to get off the Lions train. I still haven't learned, but he learned a long time. He was a long-suffering Lions fan that went, you know what, screw it, I'm out. And he joined up a long time ago, even when the Steelers were, quote unquote, maybe not the top dog in the AFC at the time either. I mean, they went through some rough patches with Cordell Stewart and Tommy Maddox under center. So, yeah. But let's talk about Michigan football here because I've had a lot of conversations with people, and I think people are at the point now where they are beyond furious with the state of the program and beyond furious with Jim Harbaugh. Now, I've always been of the kin of, okay, yeah, you can be mad, but at the same time, who are you going to get? And that's always been my constant argument. And people just come back to me and say, well, this is Michigan. I go, okay, great. That's what people make fun of us for, is you saying that line, this is Michigan. I don't care who you are. The fact is you're not winning anymore. But it's a big risk to let go of a guy like Harbaugh, who people can say what they want, but he won in the NFL. He's won in college before. And you saw what happened when you didn't have somebody writing the ship at the beginning. We went through Brady Hoke. We went through Rich Rod. That was a disaster. So, I mean, talk to me about where you're at with this program right now, because it's never been a more confusing time.
So just a little bit of history. I grew up a Michigan fan, but then I got extremely close to the program through a friend of mine who played for them. And I was fortunate enough to be there during the Gary Mueller years where they had, Desmond and Elvis, and Greg Stepnack and Dean Nigman and all those guys. And just got to understand football a little bit better through their eyes. And in fact, like directly through my friend. Yeah. So like the lineage of the history of Michigan football goes back a long ways. I mean, I'll be honest with you, my first memories are of like Butch Woolfolk and Lawrence Ricks. So they were the Schembechler years to the Mueller years to the Carr years.
Right.
And with that being said, with that kind of historical perspective and looking back, here's a couple of key points. And I think what you were talking about were some of the tweets that I get on with a longtime Michigan writer. His name is John Bacon. He's extremely close. Yes. And he and I go back and forth because we used to work together. But I was saying something to John along the lines of this last week, and that is, I personally love Jim Harbaugh. Got the haircut. I do have a lot of the intensity that Harbaugh possesses. And I also know that the man does, in fact, know a lot about football. Right. He procures NFL talent. It's evident by what's out there playing right now.
Absolutely.
But there's something wrong. And, I think it's really difficult to say it directly when you have a person of Harbaugh's stature, of Harbaugh's intensity, of Harbaugh's, let's say, a legend, right? In the Michigan program. But about 2 weeks ago, I heard Marcus Ray on a different sports talk program, and I've really been tuning sports talk out because it's mostly about complaining.
Yeah,
right?
It's all the gaslight people, and it's not there's no substance to it anymore. I can't listen to anything. That's half the reason why I started this show.
Yeah, and God bless you for doing that, because when I did work in sports radio, this exact thing that we're talking about happened, which is a former player called in, Marcus Ray, and he alluded to the fact that basically some of the kids just are not happy with the way that Jim Harbaugh is presenting the program to them. And, when you look at it, all that history that I just talked to is great. But you know what? To a kid in 2020, it doesn't mean anything.
Nope, nothing.
Nothing. And so one of the interesting things that you brought up, and I know we're going to get to high school coaching and specifically a Lamphere program, was you're spot on. When you came to Lamphere High School to play football, I got to tell you, I was a totally different person. And what I mean by that is I spent a lot of my younger years, my early years, trying to basically procure a brand, right? I was trying to be like, hey, look at me. I know what I'm doing. And you know what, Rob, it was to a fault. And what happened was I needed a lot of looking in the mirror, a lot of self-assessing, and I needed room for a lot of growth. And here was one of the craziest things. One of the people who gave me the most and most effective advice wasn't an adult. It was one of my former players, Ian Dimitri. Ian came up and he said, you know what, Wooly, you got this side of you that's exuberant, it's funny, and you never let it out because you coach with this intensity. You use the word intensity. And it was to a point where today's athlete really didn't want to be around me because it was just like this switch that was like, and I know what it's like.
For sure.
I live with it in my head. And so I did it in football. I did it to a fault in basketball. And I did it in baseball, where baseball is my main sport. Okay. But I played with an intensity and a passion. And so to your point, I know it's a long-winded explanation.
All day long, baby.
I'm looking at Harbaugh through that lens where you're to a point where you know what you're talking about, and he makes $8-9 million a year, and he doesn't want to be wrong. But that's stubborn, and that's not progressive. And the one thing you can say about a guy like Nick Saban, again, a person that I worked with on a radio show, he progressed. He, whatever you want to call it, lightened up, changed, and those kids gravitate to him now because there's the legend, but then there's the track record. And you've got the legend with Harbaugh, but you don't have the track record right now. And that's something Michigan first needs to seriously consider. And then Jim Harbaugh himself, in my opinion, has got to take a real long look in the mirror and say, what can I do? How can I adjust this? And what can I do to fix it?
Well, think about it too, right? That's the reason why he came back to college in the first place, is that the shtick ran long in San Francisco. I mean, you look at he was there for 4 years. They went to 2 NFC championship games, actually 3 NFC championship games in a Super Bowl, and then they went 8-8 his final year. And then the Niners tore it all down, were terrible. I mean, they're back now, but I mean, you don't have that kind of success, and then you just like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm leaving now. And then you hear the stories afterwards, like, he was just insufferable. I mean, it's like, yeah, we were winning, but it only goes so long. You can only push for so long. It's, Lions fans over here complaining about Jim Caldwell getting fired at 9-7. The Niners were in the Super Bowl and a couple plays away from being in back-to-back, and they let their coach go when Harbaugh was here. So it's I think you're spot on when you say that something needs to change. I think that's the reason why Urban Meyer has been so successful as well. And when he was at Ohio State, is he was able to go, listen, maybe I don't need to know it all. Maybe I need to simplify. Maybe I need to just go, you know what? These kids want to run and gun and have a good time and, be these cool guys bouncing up and down the field. Maybe that's what they do best. Maybe let me just fit myself into that and then come in only when needed. Because I feel like right now it's rigid.
It's a fine line. Because to your point, I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it's a fine line where you, as a coach, you still want to exude that confidence, that leadership quality in you without being buddy guy, right? You don't need to be, you don't want to be somebody's friend. The fine line is bridging that distance between that. You used the word mentor early on. And, to that point, look, coaches are teachers. The best ones are teachers. And that's where I needed to whack, man, hit myself in the face and be like, look, you fool, you don't need to yell and scream at the top of your lungs, because it's not about the loudest person winning here. It's about the person who can give off the most leadership and point the people and put them, most importantly, in the best positions to succeed. And right now, I really like what you had said about wearing out his welcome. They're reading between the lines too, looking to delegate things, which I think he did, but then he got away from his core values. And that's Michigan pounds the football. Let's face it. They pound the football, third down and short, they'll get a throw. And then that they wear you down and then they make halftime adjustments. And right now, I just feel like it's a lack of cultural identity within that program, and they need to get back to where they need to get.
First, when you say the phrase "put people in position to succeed," I think I got that phrase from you, because I say that a lot when I'm talking, and I feel like I'm like, man, he said it like in the exact same way. It was weird, but I think you hit the nail on the head when you say a lack of identity, because you look at Michigan's offense right now. I like Joe Milton. I'm glad they went the younger route, simply because we have seen now the last couple of years Harbaugh going with the experienced guy. All right, we're going to take Jay Ruock. We're doing the Spate thing. We're going to do Shea Patterson. We've never seen what a young kid could do and develop while getting meaningful snaps. And we have seen now that those guys weren't going to get it done. I was clamoring for Shea to be benched week 1 after the loss to Notre Dame 2 years ago. I was on that train. But right now you have this weird hybrid of like, we're going to still run I set or I offset, but we're also going to be in the shotgun in this weird pistol formation thing. But we don't really know who to put in the backfield. So we're going to put Charbonnet back there, even though he doesn't have any vision. But we're going to also do read options, and we've got motions, but the motions don't mean anything because we're running the ball anyway. Like it's a weird hybrid of what Ohio State, I think, tries to do with a lot of crosses and a lot of things, just using raw athleticism, because that's what it is. It's just athletes being athletes on Ohio State's offense and just being able to put them, as you said, in a position to succeed. Michigan can't do any of that right now because they don't know who they are. They don't know who they are. And now defensively, you've got a guy in Don Brown who has got all the accolades in the world, but you've seen now for the past 3 seasons the inability to change your scheme to fit players that you need to succeed. And I think that, we saw that against Michigan State, where you're going to play press man, you're going to send the house. Okay, well, you didn't get home, and your corners keep getting burned. So it's just like, and you can say that about a lot of teams, especially here in Detroit. But I think the Pistons are a slow-moving offense, which is going the complete opposite direction of where the NBA is going. The Tigers, I mean, I don't even know. We're going to hit on the Tigers here in a second. The Lions, I mean, run past me to death and make me throw something at the TV. It's just like an inability to change with the times, and they wonder why all of their rivals keep passing them by, and you wonder why you're stuck in 1987.
And you know what? The frustrating thing for me is, in 1987, you bring it up even further than that, 2006, 2007, wasn't good enough for Michigan fans. And they clamored for, let's go widespread. Well, you got that with Rich Rodriguez. But Rich Rodriguez brought all the baggage that Rich Rodriguez brings. Oh, we need a Michigan man. They brought in Brady Hoke, but Brady Hoke wasn't ready for the job. And maybe he's better and more improved right now, but he wasn't ready for this job of this kind of magnitude. And then you brought in, like what everybody was jokingly calling the savior, And unfortunately, the Savior has fallen victim to, like you're saying, trying to like sprint to catch up to everybody else who's passing by, when, in my opinion, I believe that the Savior was a ground and pound type of a guy who could probably most likely go out and recruit similar type athletes to what Wisconsin has, especially up front. And then that's your identity. We're going to smack you in the mouth time in and time again. I'm going to have just enough talented quarterback and receiving core, which, again, remember, back in those early 2000s, you had your Chad Henneys and your
Mike Hart's.
Yeah, you had guys that could play, Braylon Edwards, all over the football field. And, but again, that just wasn't good enough. So I think Michigan itself just simply needs to take a good long look in the mirror and say, who are we? What do we want to be? And then because you're not measuring. Nobody right now is measuring up with Ohio State. They're an SEC team in the Big Ten. And they're light years ahead of everybody else.
Yep. And they just keep churning out talent left and right. I mean, you saw, top 3 picks of this year's draft at some point played at Ohio State. You keep seeing it, and it's frustrating if you're a Michigan fan, but at the same time, I'm not even mad when they lose to Ohio State anymore, because you just go, like, it's not even the same 2 teams playing. It's not like these are comparable teams. It's like you got a master class and you got a beginner class over here going at it. And people get mad when I say that. I go, but it's the truth. You have to understand and be realistic about where your program is at. Right. And you're not there right now. And you haven't been there. And the one time you were close, you threw it away. So it's frustrating for sure. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. Because this is a make or break kind of moment here if you're a Michigan football program, where you can either make the best of this, even if you move on from Harbaugh and you go get your next guy, you better be sure, you better be right, because if you're not right, you look like an idiot.
Let me turn the tables on you. As your guest here.
For sure.
Let me ask you: do you think they're going to fire it?
Yeah. It's tough. I have seen some rumblings, how relevant or true they are, that Michigan boosters are clamoring to go get Urban Meyer and pay him like $12 million a year to come out of retirement and come win here. I think he is probably the only person that I think would be qualified enough to take this job, not because it's Michigan, but looking at the competition that you would need to play and the amount of work that would need to be done to get Michigan to where Ohio State is. That's a tall task for anybody. I know Luke Fickell's the hot name, and I asked you about this actually last weekend, because I think he's the only other up-and-comer that could possibly Michigan fans go, yeah, because he's turned around a program. But that's also another massive task that you're asking a guy who's in Cincinnati, who's not expected to win. He's just expected to not be an embarrassment. And they're just playing out of their minds. But now when you come to Michigan, the expectation is, no, you need to beat Ohio State like year 2. So,
and you look at that, when I responded to your text, I said that, they did this before, where they made a bold move and went to Ohio State, because if that's the mold, if that's the model, then, imitation, they say, is the highest form of flattery. Why not? I personally, I don't think that they're going to get rid of him. I really don't. I think there's too much invested in him right now, unless this thing just continues to go off the rails. And talking about the Michigan State game, to me, the season looked desperate when they went to that Wildcat formation, and I was just like, "What?
Why? You took your best player off the field, and you overthought it." I think with the Gaddis hiring and everything else, it feels off, and that's the best way to put it. It doesn't feel right. It's hard to watch because you don't know what they want. If you're Milton, you don't know what's going on. They tried to make it simple, and it worked against Minnesota, but then as the game got harder and you don't have people making plays for you, which is really what a quarterback needs, especially a young quarterback who's working on his touch, who's working on the intangibles, where, people forget, okay, this kid's played 4 games. Before that, last game he played that was meaningful snaps was in high school. So you got to give this kid a little bit of time. It's not like he's going to shoot out of the rocket and he's in a perfect system where everybody else around him is also going to be a first-round pick. I could play quarterback for Ohio State right now with the amount of speed and the team that's around them. It's a different game.
And they lost Nico Collins, which was a huge loss there.
Yeah, for sure. Which I don't understand why he sat out, but that's another conversation for another time.
Maybe he knew something about this COVID that we didn't know. So
maybe,
or this team, and that's a whole other thing to examine as well. So because there was a lot of scrutiny about that before, and it's interesting. But I'm not jumping off the bandwagon. I'm just really frustrated. And the moment I see it start to go south, I'll go rake leaves.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. I turned it off. I think when it got to when he threw the second pick against Wisconsin, I went, and there's the movie I can watch instead. And people get, they can get frustrated and whatever, but let's, I caution people to really think about what they're asking for, because we've seen it be much worse. I get it. They're 1-3. I understand, but it's similar to the Red Wing style of Eisman saying it's going to take a minute. So give me some time. I get it. We're in year 5, but we were at 10-win seasons just as much as last year or 2 years ago. I know we're not beating Ohio State, but things could also be where we're 3-7 losing to Toledo. So we got to put things in perspective just a little bit.
Sure.
All right, let's talk Tigers here just a little bit real quick, because I haven't got to talk to you with Tigers ever since the Tigers really got bad. So This is an interesting time. I just want to get your thoughts real quick on the direction of where you think the Tigers are going, because there's a lot of optimism right now. They just hired A.J. Hinch, who is a World Series winning, manager from the Astros. They're finally getting to the point where we're seeing some of these draft picks actually starting to play and getting in the majors. You saw some good things out of Casey Mize, Torkelson they love, Riley Green they love. But I don't know necessarily if they're ready to start spending money to go get those couple veteran guys to put them over the top. What are your thoughts on this? Because baseball is your forte, and you have to cycle kids all the time. So talk to me about where you think the Tigers are at right now. Are you excited, or are you just kind of like, meh?
No, I'm excited. I'm impressed more than anything, because initially Al Avila didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, no kidding.
I was very skeptical of the decision-making process of making him the person in charge of trying to get all this talent together. Right. But when they built the stockpile of arms that they built at the minor league system, that was intriguing. And then for them to go around and then, pick up guys like Riley Green and Spencer Torkelson. And I'll tell you what, another one that I really am excited about is Cabrera, not Miguel, but, Daniel Cabrera, I believe.
I think, I know what you're talking about.
LSU. I did have a chance I've got the SEC package for the college baseball. I've seen him. He's a good gap-to-gap hitter with just enough speed to be a double threat and stuff like that. I feel like he's going to be one of those guys that kind of floats under the radar a little bit, and then the next thing you know, he's going to become a household name.
Right.
My disappointment with the entire process is just something that kind of baffles me with Major League Baseball, and that is I watch a lot of these leagues like the NBA and the NHL in particular take these younger players and, basically push them. If they have the talent, they have the opportunity to be able to push them through the system.
Right.
And I look at a kid like Torkelson and I say to myself, what wouldn't he have benefited from
just by
as
playing?
Far as going up? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand that.
Yes.
And I grew up, again, I'm old here, but I grew up with the time when Petrie, Morris, Parrish, Gibson, Trammell, and Whitaker came up through the farm system. Interesting fact that you may or may not remember, but Mr. Magnus's grandfather, Ed Catalinas, was the director of scouting during that time.
Oh, really? I did not know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, and he brought all those guys up. Mr. Catalinas, whose Law and I did cut to get tickets to the '84 team. But he brought all that talent up. And those guys were – I literally remember the conversation about Lance Parrish. He gave up something like 17 or 24 pass balls his rookie year. It was awful. It was terrible. And he was a work in progress because he was a change. He moved from third base to catcher. And long story short, he turned himself into an all-star – with, in some cases, Hall of Fame numbers. And my point to that is we suffered through seasons where he batted .233, but we also watched when he hit .282 with 33 home runs and 105 runs driven in. Alan Trammell, same thing.
Right.
Up, down, became a professional and found water. And that's what I look at these guys at the age of 22, 23, 24, 25, and I'm like, why are they not in the big leagues yet? Because at that age, these guys were winning and contending for World Series, and we're like, they're young, and I don't buy that. So if it would be one criticism, I'm sorry, let me put the pluses with the minuses.
Yeah.
The prospects and the talent, I'm excited about. The cons of it all, I want to see them come up, and I don't know if they're in any position like you said at the outset of bringing a free agent. But remember, it was 20 years ago when they were in the same boat. And it wasn't Juan Gonzalez. That was a failed experiment. It was Ivan Rodriguez.
Yes.
It was the linchpin.
Right.
When they brought him in and he was able to influence more guys, and then surrounded with some of that burgeoning talent that they had, they were in the mix for a long, long time.
Right.
And I would love to see something like that happen. If they can bring in a couple of free agents with some influence and some clout, and they're like, and there's been rumors of if Verlander goes post Tommy John that he may want to close out his career here.
Yeah, that's and it's being smart about it, right? Being smart about the acquisitions. Like when Pudge came here, he'd already won a ring, right? So he wasn't ring chasing at this point, right? He got a big deal to come here, but he was the first piece of the dominoes to kind of clip, and it allowed you to build off of something. So when you make a big trade to get Miguel Cabrera and you sell the farm to go get him at 25 years of age or whatever, everyone goes okay, and you build off of these things. Yeah. You make that connection. I'm in total agreement with you, though. We talked, me and my brother-in-law Mike, who I actually do the show with. We talked about at the beginning of the season, like I don't know. Especially if they're like 10, 15 games in and we're kind of saying we're treading water, why not? What is the harm? You're not going to win the World Series this year anyway. You're not close yet. So why not bring these kids up? See what you have. At some point, you got to figure out what you have because AAA only gets you so far.
And I know for a fact Gardenhire would have been one of the guys to have been able to handle it. I thought he did an admirable, more than admirable.
As did I.
What a great manager. And then Hinch, that's supposed to be his thing. He's supposed to be able to take young, talented guys and get the most out of it. And, forget about whether or not he was a player and forget about the cheating scandal as well. I mean, look, you and I have talked, even when you were a student, about what's going on in baseball. I mean, the adage, if you ain't cheating in it, you ain't trying, comes from baseball. And there's been so many things that you could point to. Look, you still have to hit the ball. You still have to make plays. You still have to execute.
Absolutely.
Hinch is a great pickup for them. And if he can work some of that magic like he did with the younger players in Houston and bring that here.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's an exciting time. I think I mentioned this on the show a few weeks ago where I just feel like Detroit sports fans in general, we've been down in the dumps now for a decade and a half. It feels like, quite frankly, up and down for the most part. But I'm starting to see the end of the tunnel a little bit for some of these teams. Like I know the Wings are still quite far off, but you have Yzerman here. You got some young players that you're really excited about. You're not doing anything signing old guys for really long contracts. There's a lot of good things to be had about a lot of these. The Pistons tonight, as we're talking, they have the draft. They just made a trade for the 16th pick and got Trevor Ariza. I don't know if you just saw that.
I know that. Good.
Getting an expiring deal with all the money that they've never had before, and they're not going and spending it on Charlie Villanueva and Aaron Gordon. So, you know what I mean? So there's things to be excited about in Detroit sports. It's finally about time that we're able to kind of start seeing the upswing and the fruits of the labor of being patient as a fan base. So it's extremely. All right, let's shift now to the biggest reason why you're on this show is talk about Lamphere sports. As I mentioned earlier, I'm from Lamphere. I went there. You were a teacher of mine. But you're also a coach. You've been you've done baseball since what, 2002? Was that the first year? 2002. Yep. I've been around when you coached basketball, whether it was freshman, JV, varsity. I've seen you coach football. That's how I first met you, as you're an assistant coach for football. But first thing I want to just hit on right off the bat is talk to me about this resurgence of Lamphere football this past season, because wow, what a freaking story. Where I don't think anybody had any real expectations coming out of the last few years, and man, shot right out of the freaking cannon. Did you guys do it?
So, okay, going back on all that stuff, I've been a head coach since 2002 of the Lamphere baseball program. I'm so proud of that program, and most importantly, let me give credit where credit's due. Great players that have come through there. Mm-hmm. We've been able to send 32 kids on to play college baseball. We have had a major league draft pick.
Yep.
And just some great people involved in that program all the way throughout.
Absolutely.
I was a basketball coach in two different stints. One was highly successful, brought the only league championship. Again, great players, great kids. And then the second time around was one of those big times where I was asked to try to bring some stability to a program. And honestly, Rob, probably not one of the greatest coaching jobs that I've ever done. And that was the one that made me look real hard in the mirror. And then I also was a head coach of the hockey team, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
And so then a longtime football assistant. And to answer your question, I did know what we had. I was fortunate enough to coach 6 or 7 guys. Depending
so did
on
I. Funny enough, so did I. When they were 12 and 13, I had all of them. I had the Joe McNabbs, the Hernandez, the KJs. I had them all. So the Jake Malicks, the Drew Websters, I had them all before they got to you guys.
For me. And so it was never in doubt whether or not they were winners.
Yep.
I just was like, I knew this.
Yep.
So when Coach Glenn had decided to step down to go back to his alma mater at Our Lady of the Lakes,
yep.
A couple of names have been bantied around, and lo and behold, it was presented to a couple of veteran coaches who had been there.
Yeah.
Be honest with you, I didn't really want anything to do with the head coaching job, but I wanted something to do with the program and to be really involved.
Okay.
And so I talked to Mr. Masano, Art Masano, who is the head coach, and I said, hey, look, if we get a veteran staff back together, and we were jokingly calling it getting the band back together, I think we can go there and we can win. I think we can win. Now, 8-0, 5 shutouts.
Yeah, didn't see that one coming. Yeah,
no,
for sure.
and neither did I don't think anybody did. And honestly, if you went to the first couple of practices, and rightfully so, we talk about today's player, they were very standoffish. They were like, "Who are these old guys? What are we doing? Why do we need to listen to them? Blah blah blah."
Yeah.
And it was a combination of everything. Like I had taken over a lot of the conditioning portion. And, really kind of got into that initially. And it was really important because in the summer, really, truly, that was all we could do. We couldn't have any contact.
Couldn't touch each other. Couldn't do anything.
Yeah. No pads, no anything.
Right.
And so a lot of it fell on that kind of thing. And we started with that mantra that nobody was going to outwork us. And then it trickled into Mr. Bellier, who, everybody who's ever gone to Lamphere High School knows that if you're listening for Mr. Bellier on the field, you got to hear something like that. And he's been coaching, quite frankly, Rob, he was my offensive line coach.
Right.
And so a lot of people might look at him as this guy who's an old, crusty, coach, but he was a national champion for Hillsdale, and he knows his football. And, don't think that there wasn't any correlation between that improved line play and the fact that he brought it there. And then the great thing that Mr. Masano brought to the table was a pedigree of winning. He's also the golf coach, a very successful golf coach.
Absolutely, for sure.
But Mr. Masano is incredibly pragmatic, and he puts up a huge, front that almost seems inapproachable. But what I call it is unyielding and wanting to be excellent.
Yes.
So you had a lot of dynamics with some veteran coaches, guys who knew each other real well. And then we have a Coach Mullen who came back. He was part of the staff when we coached with Coach Sharon. Mm-hmm. Coach Causey, who was our defensive coordinator, great coach. Works with the track team now, does a fantastic job with that as well. Yep. Joe Savell, who was a holdover from last season. And then one of the interesting points was, and one of the great, we talked early in this whole interview about coaching growth. Yeah. Jason Sharon putting his ego aside and coming back on the field to call plays and to make that offense as like an offensive play caller was something else. So, the coaching was fun. But again, I want to give credit where credit's due. Those kids
great kids.
Oh, man, the heart and the guts and the grit and the tenacity. Mm-hmm. I'm going to tell you right now, that Country Day team that we played had some incredible athletes. There's going to be some guys going on to do some Division I things. But we are here where we were there. We weathered the storm, and we were in very good positions throughout that game to, surprise somebody and win. And, unfortunately, it did not for one time, it didn't go our way this season. But what a great season. I mean, you talked about some of the names. Yep. Joe McNabb was obviously one of the
stud,
key.
Absolute stud. He's going to go major places. I'm so excited for his future.
And, he was one of the big, I say big, 6'6" reasons why.
Billy he was taller than me in 12.
Exactly. But then you look at other players who came along and improved, like KJ Whitman. There was never, ever a question about KJ's ability on the football field.
Nope,
and you want to talk about one of the things that I bring to the table, it was just, hey, KJ, let's keep you in the game. Let's keep you moving in this direction, blah, blah, blah. Right. And now he's, getting looks from colleges.
Right. I think he just got an offer from Adrian. I think I just saw recently. Yep. So that's huge. Right. And I've coached with his dad too, Kevin. So he's a great guy too.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, Jake Malik and Javari Johnson and Nico Hernandez and Ben Johnson. And I mean, seriously, I don't get mad at the Lamphere community. I could go on and name the entire roster.
I'll give you a couple more. Dylan Chargo, Nick Christich. Had them all. I had them all.
Yeah, they're just tremendous kids
Yep.
with a great attitude and
Yep.
a never say die type of like just grit to them. And that's what I saw when I had a lot of those guys in baseball. They won a district championship as sophomores.
Yep.
We had a couple good senior leaders on that team, but I knew we could win. And that's why, to me, it wasn't a huge surprise.
Yeah.
To the rest of the league, sure. I mean,
I'm sure, absolutely. No one expected what you guys shut the cannon. And it's funny. It's funny when I hear all these names because, like I said, I won championships myself with the same kids. So I feel that like at the the 7th, 6th, 7th, 8th grade level, with the Madison Knights Wolverines, all those kids that you named, I had. You know what I mean? So I can, and it's funny because I think that's one of the biggest sources of frustration from maybe the city and people around is like, man, we had a lot of success at this level. Why is it not translating to the high school level? And obviously high school is a different animal altogether, right? You got 14-year-olds playing against men at times, you know what I mean? There's a big difference in talent and everything else, but to finally see it come together in a way that everyone's like, yes, and everyone can get behind it, and there's no egos and there's nothing about it. It's just pure unadulterated happiness for a group of kids. Yeah, for a group of kids that were just like this. Yes, we're doing it, and we're doing it our way. The Jason Sharon thing though did shock me when I first heard that he came back. He was the varsity coach when I was in school, and it was so. It is what it was. But at the same time, one of the biggest, I guess, complaints that I've heard over the years about not just Lamphere's program, but I think a lot of high school, programs that, you look at the talent, you go, there's a lot of talent here. Why is it not clicking? Is the inability to change and to fit your schemes according to players. And I felt like that was a little bit what was happening with Lamphere, not even when Sharon was there, but the Glenn era as well. I felt like there was a little bit of that where we were trying to fit some square pegs into round holes, and not to talk down about anybody's schemes or anything like that, but I just felt like this year, for one reason or another, it just felt like we were able to kind of put it all together and accentuate the positives and hide the negatives. Is that what you felt this year? Because, like, we've always been this big, massive spread offense for what it feels like forever, and we didn't have the kids to run that kind of offense for a long time.
So, and I too, and I'm not trying to be political,
because
I'll shoot it as straight as I can.
For sure.
But here's the deal. I don't want to talk for any other coach. Here's what I understand. You made a couple of allusions to like changing for the sake. So you don't want to change just to change, right? You can't take the latest YouTube thing and like throw it out like, all right, we're going to run this now. No, you first have to identify your culture and your identity and who you want to be. And then you have to, like we had talked about at the onset of this thing, put people into positions where they can thrive and be successful. Yes. And Dylan Chargo was the quarterback last year. And that doesn't mean that he couldn't have been a great quarterback this season.
For sure.
But we needed him as a tight end. And lo and behold, thank goodness you mentioned that name, because Joe McNabb went down in the Southlake game. And if we don't have another viable option at the tight end defensive end, which we don't because we don't have a ton of depth, then we're really struggling. And it was that kind of selfless act. Yes. And that's just one of those. There were so many of those that took place this year that the ability to change and say, okay, I know Drew Webster. Drew Webster's a fullback. But when our line got banged up and we lost one of our best linemen, Drew had to go to the interior, had to change his numbers. And I mean, that's anybody who's got any inkling of superstition knows that that's like something you don't want to do. You don't want to mess with that mojo.
No.
But Drew went from 20 to 57, didn't miss a beat, and willingly was like, Coach, you need me to play there, I'm going to play there. And those are the things that I think we exemplified as a coaching staff. Like, we're gonna sacrifice, and we're gonna meet you in the middle and adapt to this entire thing. And I think our players finally got to that point, because trust is such a huge component.
It's everything.
Of any team.
It's everything. It's everything. If I can't rely, I played interior offensive lineman for a good chunk of my career. If I can't rely on the tackle next to me or the center next to me, and if you don't know what you're doing, I'm screwed, because we all look bad now because of it. And a lot of people who maybe aren't on the ins and outs of football like we are, where, it legitimately does take 11 guys all on the same page to get somewhere. I mean, getting 10 yards is not easy. I know it looks like it is, but it's not. And to be able to get a stop and only hold a team under 10 yards in 3, if not 4 plays, is nearly impossible when you really think about the odds of it. So the fact that you were able to do what you did defensively and to put these kids in positions to where you're just like, man, it's just gelling into put these kids on a pedestal where you just go, man, it just seems like they're all buying in. And once you get buy-in, that's when you're dangerous, because then it's like there's nothing that can stop you at this point. I have my team, I got my coaches, I'm good. There's nothing you can do anymore that's going to stop me.
And that was a lot of what we kept preaching. And schematically, you know, Coach Causey and Coach Masano putting their brains together and putting those, especially on the defensive side of things.
Yeah, Masano was the D coordinator, I think, the first go around for this staff. I believe, when I was there.
Again, you talk about delegating and letting yourself go. Defense was his forte.
Yeah.
He let himself go, gave it over to Coach Causey. Causey put those kids in position, and lo and behold, I mean, you can go down a line.
Yeah.
Tristan Gist with a huge interception against Southlake. Drew Webster with a fumble and pickup against Country Day. Seth Ernest with the pick six.
Love Seth.
AJ Whitman with a key interception. You just look at all these guys that made plays all over the field. It was because, trust leads to loyalty. Loyalty leads to, you being able to just buy into exactly what's going on.
Absolutely.
And then because you have that reliability on the guy next to you, then you can just go out and play.
Yeah, and you're not thinking
anymore. When you get that, it's paycheck time, you know, and they cash the check week in and week out. Those kids did. And that's why, I mean, look, I'm just at a point in my career where I don't need it anymore. I like it when people say nice things to me. I really do.
Yeah, right.
And I hate it when people say mean things to me. At my heart, I'm a nice guy.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is the players play. And these players played. They executed. They worked their tails off. They deserve all the credit in the world, and that's just what I'll stand by. They just they were great.
It's so good too for the future of the program. I know with COVID and everything right now, we don't know what that's going to necessarily look like. Hopefully next year it'll be more of a normal off season. I have my doubts, but nonetheless, but to be able to grow the program again and to get the numbers back a little bit, because there was some times there where, man, we were feeling really sparse. Even after I left, my sister just graduated from Lamphere, so I would stop by and it's like, man, there's there's 20 kids on the team. You're like, this is not where we want to be heading. So I just wanted to take a moment to really single the football program out, because it is a drastic turnaround, but it's also one that I feel like it's something that the Lamphere community has just been dying for so long. It's just been like everyone was so overjoyed for the kids and for the program and for the school. It was nice to finally just be like, all right, we did it, and we had it, not just you win the division and you're competitive and you look competent out there and you look like you belong, and to show your, I don't want to sound cheesy here, but show your Ram pride a little bit and be like, that's my team and that's my school and I'm proud as hell to be a part of what's going on here.
Graduating from there, growing up in the city.
Yeah.
My son, who went to Athens this year, he played baseball with all these kids and growing up. So, I mean, I've watched them since they were little kids, and knowing what kind of what they brought to the table.
Absolutely.
I just can't be any happier for them. I really am proud of them. I'm keeping my fingers crossed, like you said too, because so many of them we didn't get a baseball season last year, so they didn't get a chance to their junior year. There's literally college level talent that just hasn't had a chance to showcase itself.
Right.
And so the question is now, what are they going to do to pivot? Because it's going to be a challenge in this winter to get anything done baseball wise, what I mean?
Absolutely.
So, your KJ Whitman's, Dylan Chargos, Drew Webster's, Jake Malik's, all those guys are my ball players too.
Yep.
And we just got to keep our fingers crossed that
we get a season.
I hope so.
I do too.
You said it and you saw it.
Yeah.
That was such a welcome break from the monotony of let's get up and Zoom, let's get up and sit there in front of the computer and let's worry about the presidential. No, presidential election, what? We didn't have time for that. We were preparing for Cranbrook, and we were preparing for Detroit Chandler Park and Detroit Country Day, and what a welcome thing that was, because that right there shows you the importance of the high and you know what? This is coming from the baseball guy. The importance of high school football.
Absolutely. It's the lifeblood of a school a lot of times, right? Like there's nothing more exciting than a Friday night home game against a rival or a divisional opponent when you're like, we got a good shot of beating these guys or whatever. There's nothing better than that.
No, there's no comparison. I wish there were, but you can't. It's not.
No. Let's shift now to baseball here. Your forte, our last topic of the evening here before I let you go. I've kept you for 45 minutes already. So for a long time, that's your bread and butter, right? It is baseball, right? You've been running the program now for almost 20 seasons, which is crazy because you don't look like you should be that old, but regardless.
Thank you.
But, the biggest thing, and I even recognized this when I was in high school and when I was there, and we had a lot of conversations about it, Greg Fettis, the one who was drafted by the Tigers and the Oakland A's in separate times, he was in school when I was in school. So, and you've had teams that had a lot of individual talent that maybe didn't succeed as much as they should have, and you've had teams that maybe on paper didn't look like they should necessarily be winning as much as they have, but they've also won districts and so on and so forth. But the one thing about your program that I've always admired, and is something that is a hopeful potential future head coach in my lifetime, is the model of consistency and of expectations, and the expectation of, no matter what, we are going to conduct ourselves a certain way. We are going to play a certain way, and that is Lamphere baseball. And to have the consistency, maybe it doesn't show up necessarily where it's consistently 15, 17, 18 wins every year, but it's a consistency of being competitive and putting a good product out on the field no matter what the situation is, and holding yourself in high regard. Talk to me about the challenges that it took to get to where you're at now, to where at this point it's like you're just maintaining and you're striving for more every single season.
So, a couple things. First of all, thank you very much, for recognizing that. And again, like it's so ironic because I did this quick little video, and I was only doing it to show a kid an example, and I put it out on Facebook, and lo and behold,
I saw it. Yeah, I saw it today.
These guys come out from the 02, 03 teams and everything.
Yeah,
I was so fortunate. The 02, 03 teams were all kids that I grew up coaching with. So when I say grow up, I was their freshman coach. Yeah. I was their JV coach, and then I was their varsity coach. Oh, and wow. I'm talking in 3 sports.
Wow.
So I'm talking like 10 out of 13 kids played football, basketball, and baseball with me, starting like in 1998 and then culminating up to 2002 and 2003.
Wow.
What a great thing to have that kind of loyalty and trust in the program. And I'm going to rewind the tape even further back. When I was given my first coaching opportunities was in 1998, first under Russ McKenzie in football, and then under a guy named John Haas in basketball, and I'll get right back to John, but also Frank Persicino, for whom I played and had the most respect for as a coach, as a player. Those guys all came with different strengths. Frank, first and foremost, was what you would call a player's coach. So he knew how to demand, but still talk to you as a human being.
Right.
Russ McKenzie he was probably one of the most prepared football coaches you will ever see in your entire life. Yeah. Practice plans, all these things, and that team showed it. They went to the playoffs, they won division championships, and that was when Lamphere was in dire straits.
Yeah.
And then I had an opportunity to work under a guy named John Haas, and John brought this idea of family together, and what he did was he actually verbalized it. It was like one of the first coaches that I saw ever be vulnerable, and told me, he's like, well, family means more than just like, hey, put your hand in here. He was like, your wife's given up time for you to be able to do this. Right. And soon you're going to realize that you're going to have kids. At the time I didn't have it, so I didn't really get it.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, he was right. He passed the book along to me called Leading with the Heart. And that was by Mike Krzyzewski. And that was my playbook. Even though basketball didn't fit into everything, the plan for what it fit for everything. And then I was also lucky enough to be able to sit, at the time with Andy Lopez at one of the conventions. And baseball guys, this is when I realized that baseball guys were the best guys in the entire world, because he literally handed over to me a 3-week preseason program and said, this is what we do at Florida. This is what we do at Pepperdine. Wow. And I was like, what? Yeah. Seriously? Yeah. And I'm looking at it, and it had this plan, and I brought it and combined it with some of the stuff that I wanted to see as a player and that I had the opportunity to see at Oakland. And then all of a sudden, guys were like, whoa, this is unlike any baseball practice that we've ever had. Yeah. And I think that's like the biggest thing that you get. You get like this miniature college experience when you come here. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Rob, I mean, I've had some incredible runs. 06 was a group of Madison Heights Little Leaguers, very much like this football team that we had today, who just were – I remember it. Brian Mason was a kid who graduated in 06, and he came to me, and he said, Coach, we're going to win a state championship. And I'm like, okay, Brian, all right.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Lo and behold, they came, 2 games away and a tough out at third base from doing it. But it's when you have that kind of team and you have that kind of leadership, and then you pass the torch, so to speak, from year to year, that's what happens with that kind of consistency and that expectation. And, there was a rough patch there. We had a couple of things go not the way that I had expected. And I'm going to tell you, again, full transparency, 2015, 2016 was probably the lowest point in my coaching career. And you need these things, these wake up, you need them. People have to provide you with them. And then you individually as a coach must be cognizant enough to be able to acknowledge it, right? Mm-hmm. So I was sent to a aspiring principals program. I think the intention that Lamphere had was, why don't you become a principal someday? And I realized then there that I still have my eye on wanting to one day be an athletic director. I don't want to be a principal, but the leadership stuff that I was taught during this academy and the stuff that I was able to bring to, not only to my classroom, but to my field was unparalleled. And it also made me stare. Like I had to do these exercises where we're like, well, you talk about core values. What are your core values? And I was like,
oh yeah. Whoops.
and I didn't realize until you really put out there what they are, how far I had strayed from those because of whatever. You can use whatever excuse you want. And I had sacrificed that. And that was my fault. So as the leader of the program, I had to do a complete 180 and then not only readjust my values, my goals, and reestablish those, but share them with my players so that they can understand, oh, he's not nuts. He's not crazy for yelling at me. This is just what he believes in. And, trust and loyalty and, family and camaraderie, all those things are core values that you bring to the table and that if you want to play for Lamphere baseball, you have to bring. And yeah, do kids muddy the water? Sure they do. They talk about each other behind the back. And when that happens, then you got to coach them up. You got to tell them the story about the great story about the buckets of ice cream. If you got 2 buckets of ice cream next to each other and a little sliver of poop falls into one, well, guess what? That bucket of ice cream is no good anymore, right? So you got to figure out either how to, eat around that little sliver of poop, or you got to figure out how to get rid of the poop. And those are the things that you start, those little stories that you acquire over the course of your coaching career that help you really adjust and be better. And I'm going to tell you this right now. And I made this commitment. I tell it to all my classes and I tell it to all my teams. If I get to a point where I think I know it all and I get to a point where I'm the expert on everything, that's the time I need to walk away. Because in both my profession as a teacher and in my profession as a coach, there's still so many people that do it well and do it better than you, and you can learn from them and they're willing to share it with you. If you're not willing to listen, then it's time for you to go, because your main job as a high school coach and your main job as a high school teacher is, back to the old adage, put people in position to be successful like yourself and then watch them be great, because it's not about you anymore.
Yeah, and that's so key, and that's something that's kind of been a common theme across a few of these interviews that I've done with Coach Brian Barnes from Bishop Foley, Stephanie Jerky from Notre Dame College. It's really just, at the end of the day, implementing what you just said, your core values, and being like, listen, this is the bar, and you have to make that bar. And sometimes that means that it's not the best kid, it's the right kid, and it's the right group of kids. And I was there for a couple years there where the expectation among the circles, maybe not in your mind, but in a lot of people's mind, was a state championship. You had, a lot of college athletes that were leaving on certain teams when I was in high school, and they didn't maybe live up to those expectations. And I remember getting phone calls from you saying, yeah, we didn't play well today. And, as I was filming a band recital or I was doing something, or I'd call you and ask you how a game went, and you go, yeah, we lost. And it was just one of those things where you're like, I don't get it. But then I think the year after, I think it was my senior year or the year after, I think it was maybe not necessarily the most star-studded team in the world, but you guys made a district final run, I think it was. And it was a totally different you at the same time too, where it was like you could, some of the transformation that was happening. And, I just have to commend you, though, for the fact that I always felt – at nothing else, when I was a student there, before I was a student, and after, or even when my sister was going there, it was the one model that if I could model my own program after, it would be the way you run your baseball program, because I've never seen a kid, even kids that have been cut by you, even kids that maybe don't necessarily agree with your philosophy. I've never had someone come and tell me, well, Wooley was unfair, or Wooley favored so-and-so over me because of X, Y, and Z. I've never had that conversation with anybody. And it's so rare for somebody who's coached as long as you have to have that, and you have these egos and you have parents. And I've always found a lot of times in my coaching experience, baseball parents sometimes are a little crazy because every kid's on a travel team and everybody thinks their kid is amazing. It's a little scary. It's a little scary at times, but to be able to produce the kind of talent that you have in such a small area like Madison Heights is, that's also split up with 2 high schools, which it shouldn't, but that's another conversation for another time. And to be able to churn out the talent and to develop talent and to get kids into upper education and give them a chance not only play at the next level, but to get into college education that they may not have gotten otherwise outside of athletics is so impressive and so important that I think that is something that needs to be commended, and you should be commended for it, because I don't think a lot of programs think like that, unfortunately. And I think it's more about the winning. It's more about the what do I have in the short term. But you've always thought long term. I've never seen you go, well, it's going to be this year, and then after a while, it's going to be it's going to be shitty for a little while. Like, you've never had that mindset. It's no, this is my 15 guys. This is what we're going to roll with, and
we're going to battle.
Yeah, and we're going, and it's it, and I've been there to call games, for you. I've announced games for you and everything else. I've probably gotten looks at other teams. By the way, I announced some of those games, but the point is that it's consistent, and there's an integrity to the way you play the game, the way you coach the game, so you should be commended for that for sure. I've had a tremendous amount of fun doing this. I held off on contacting you until it was a special enough kind of day or a special enough kind of episode, because for me, like I said, you're an extremely big mentor for me in my regard. I've talked about doing this for so long, and I finally just said, screw it. What am I waiting for? And just went for it. So I was like, all right, you know what? Let's do it. The times that I had in your class are some of my favorite memories ever of high school. So, also, once again, thank you so much, because without you and your class and your teachings, this would not exist for the 7 people who listen or for the 700 people who listen. Doesn't matter to me. At the end of the day, it's a fun thing for me. But so thank you for that. Thank you for being a model of somebody that also as a fellow coach that I can model myself after from a role model standpoint, and the way you conduct yourself both on and off the field. And also just thank you for being a great friend, because at the end of the day, that's what it's truly important.
Well, I'm going to tell you right back at you. I keep talking about players and players and players and players. I've had the pleasure of having 21 years of classroom experience like this too.
Absolutely.
And for people like yourself, these are the kinds of resuscitative things when you've dealt with Zoom all day and you're trying to catch kids up on work.
Yeah.
To hear you say those things, and then to see the great things that are happening in your life. And that's what I will go on Facebook and Twitter and look at the great things that are happening. All I want to see is people of our community getting the most out of what they've been given. And you're doing that. And you know what? It's a pleasure of mine to be able to provide that opportunity. And it's a pleasure of mine to be able to call you a friend, and what a great job you were as a kid and as a student and everything else. So look, I'm happy to do it anytime you want to talk. I'll be as candid as I can be. But no, I enjoyed it too. I think this is awesome. I think it's so cool to see everything in action, and good job. I'm just proud of you, and I'm happy for you.
I think we'll need to get the whole staff on at one point. We'll get a whole joint call going. I'll put them all.
We can do that. We all know how to use Zoom now.
Yeah, so. Right. Yeah, exactly. I'll get them all on there. So it'll be a good time for sure. But stay on the line for me just a second. But we're gonna wrap things up here with Mr. Coach Adam Wooley. Hopefully, we'll have him on sooner rather than later. Maybe talk about an upcoming baseball season. It's a little early, so I can't ask about the team or anything. So
happy 200th, by the way. Great job.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. And welcome back to the second part of the I'm Always Right Sports Podcast. Once again, we really want to thank Mr. Adam Wooley for joining us for part 1 of this show. It's the 2-year anniversary of the I'm Always Right Sports Podcast. We now join you back here. I got the Merck's own Mike Merkel here. As always, he is here with us. Once again, I am the mouth of Michigan, Rob Mendyka. Once again, big shout out to Mr. Wooley for joining us here for the first part of this. This is going to be a long episode today, guys. Lots of stuff to talk about, which is exciting in a lot of aspects, just because, quite frankly, we haven't. This is different. We haven't had the amount of, I think, moves, especially on the Detroit Pistons side. I can't even tell you the last time it's been like this.
I don't think they've ever had.
No, it's
legitimately ever.
No, for sure, and that's what's crazy, right? Is that you look at it and you go, it's one of those things to where you're excited, you're nervous, you don't know what the hell's going on. There's a lot of things. NBA free agency was explosive, to say the least. I think it's everything that people want NFL free agency to be, because NBA is there's so many loopholes and sign in trades and extend and release and in and out and sideways, left, right, east, west. It's NBA cap management has got to be the biggest migraine ever. If you tell me I am a cap manager for an NBA franchise, I go, so you're a genius.
Yeah.
And you know how to mess with numbers, because I don't know how.
Legitimately, looking at obviously I look at the Lakers stuff right now because LeBron's there and stuff, and it's my favorite team, I guess, right now. That's unfortunate. But just the amount of money that they're paying all these people, and I go, how does that fit into their cap?
Yeah.
Because they're paying KCP $30 million now.
How does this work?
80 doesn't even have his max deal yet, and they paid 12 people on the roster already, and I go,
Dennis Schroeder.
And I'm like, do they even have money to pay Anthony Davis anymore? Yeah. They do. They have $150 million still in cap, and I go, where?
Montrezl Harrell's here now, and you're like, wait, what?
How did you fit all these people in? And the Pistons are doing the same thing, except their whole team is overhauled. So now it's they have dead cap over here, and then they have sign and trades over here, and I go, how do you even mess with that?
So before we get super deep in, I'm actually going to go through every single move that the Pistons made. So go take a nap, go grab a sandwich. Yeah, all right. So first of all, they traded away Bruce Brown, right? Which was a bit of a shocker, I would say, right? He was the first. And that, I think, if nothing else, that shows you that Troy Weaver is definitely, in charge, because that was Stefanski's first pick as, our de facto GM. So it tells you that the Pistons are very much all in on the vision that Troy Weaver has, right? So they traded him away for Dezanin Musa and a 2021 second-round pick. Then they made another trade, which we'll get to in a second. Basically, they got the number 16 overall pick in exchange for Trevor Ariza. Excuse me. Because, sure, why not, right? They sold a second-round pick in 2021 for $4.6 million, which I think is crazy that you just sell picks now. Sure, why not? They drafted Killian Hayes at number 7, so they they were stand pat. They took, I liken this guy a lot too. I like the fact that he's the first true point guard they've had literally since Chauncey. They have not had a true point guard since him. Rodney Stuckey was awful, Reggie Jackson's bad. We haven't had a point guard with any sort of upside. And Brandon Jennings, get out of here. You know what I mean?
Brandon Knight.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, could have Kemba Walker, but it's fine. Whatever. They drafted Isaiah Stewart, the center out of Washington, with pick 16. They trade away Luke Kennard. So the two trades, the Luke Kennard trade as well as the trade to get the 16th pick for Trevor Ariza, were kind of roped into one here. So basically, the Pistons gave up Bruce Brown, Luke Kennard, Justin Patton, Portland's 2023 second-round pick, and our own second-round picks for 2024, 2025, and 2026. So I don't expect the Pistons to be picking the second round anytime soon. In return, they got the number 16 pick, that Dezanin Musa, Jalen Hands, Rodney Magruder, Toronto's 2021 second-round pick. So Luke Kennard is no longer. He's on the Clippers now. I expect him to really thrive in LA because he's just going to sit in the corner like Kyle Korver did and just shoot threes all day, Real quick on that, though. What are your thoughts on giving up Kennard? When they gave him up, I was a little bummed, honestly. I know he's coming up pretty quickly here for a new contract, as well as he's had some injury problems, and defensively he's, quite frankly, a liability. But what were your thoughts on Kennard? Because I still liked his offensive efficiency, even though maybe he wasn't the greatest on defense.
Yeah, he was. I liked him. He did get injured a lot though.
That's my big problem. I didn't realize.
Yeah, he has a lot of knee problems. So with that, I'm okay trading him away. But I did he just reminded me of the Kyle Korver-esque.
Yeah,
where you just like sit in the corner. He'd be a great sixth man off the bench.
I think he was the first guy too that we've seen in a while that's actually like progressed. Like it feels like a lot of draft picks that we've had, like Henry Ellington was a complete disaster, right? Mm-hmm. Like some of these guys were just like you felt like you were seeing some progression from him, but I also don't think they were going to want to pay him. Mm-hmm. And with some of the money that's being handed out in the NBA, it is insane, which we'll get to. Obviously, they trade for a sec. Oh, I'm sorry, they drafted Sadiq Bey with their 19th overall pick, which they got in part of that trade. So the Pistons turned one pick into 3 first-rounders and a second-round pick in literally hours, which is insane to me. So they draft a point guard in Killian Hayes. They draft the center from Washington. I don't even remember Isaiah Stewart. And then they draft Sadiq Bey. So, I mean, the one common theme between all these guys is defense, quite frankly. They're all, defensive-minded. Sadiq Bey is a 3-and-D kind of guy. Isaiah Stewart, who's a little bit undersized to be signed. I think he's only 6'9", which is funny to say he's only 6'9", but they're all they're all key defensive pieces, right? Which I think is exciting, and I think that's kind of where you're starting to get a little bit of a vision of what Troy Weaver wants to do, especially with some of these other moves that they make. They draft Sadiq Bey. They trade for a second-round pick. They traded future considerations, whatever that is, for the number 38 overall pick and Tony Bradley. Sure, why not? And with that 38th pick, they draft Saban Lee, another guard out of Vanderbilt. What you saw, I think, Weaver do a lot of this is take on contracts that other people didn't want in return for assets. So really utilizing some of this space that they had, and in order to kind of like, you know what, we need to tear it all down, and let's jumpstart this rebuild the best way possible, and get some quality players in here as quickly as possible. They traded for Dwayne Dedman in exchange for Kyrie Thomas and Tony Snell. Tony Snell had an expiring contract. Kyrie Thomas apparently is not part of the equation here. Thon Maker, my boy, Thon Maker is gone. Unfortunately, they didn't like his lack of production, apparently. They signed Mason Plumlee to a 3-year, $25 million deal. We'll talk about that in a second. I'm not necessarily thrilled with that. They signed Jahlil Okafor to a 2-year veterans minimum deal. Josh Jackson they signed, the former number 4 overall pick from Kansas. He's coming to Detroit now. You've got Jeremy Grant coming over from Denver on a 3-year, $60 million deal. Mike's really excited about that. Christian Wood is no longer a Piston. They did a sign and trade with Houston. That kind of goes back into the number 16 pick. A lot of this stuff, it was reported, and then, oh, by the way, here's what actually is going to happen, though, like from a league perspective. So it's a little weird. They gave up Christian Wood, a heavily protected 2021 first-round pick, which gets more and more less protected, and which will wind up, I think at one point, there's almost no way that Houston gets a first-round pick out of us. It was going to wind up being second. And then a Lakers 2021 second-round pick in return for number 16, which was Isaiah Stewart. Trevor Ariza and that second-round pick. They made another trade for DeLon Wright, which was a 3-team deal with Oklahoma City and Dallas, which is, once again, insane, where they sent Trevor Ariza. So Trevor Ariza was a Piston for about 48 hours, it seems like. Mm-hmm. And then the big thing, though, that I do want to get into is that it looks like some of these guys, Dwayne Dedman and Magruder, are going to be waived and stretched, which means that they're going to cut them, but they're going to stretch out their contract so they don't take the hit now. It's going to be spread out over the next 5 years. Now, you may remember this from the Josh Smith fiasco, where Van Gundy went, "You're so awful, and we really don't want you here, that we're just going to cut you and pay you periodically over the next 5 years." And we just got out of that, and now we're going to do it again with these two contracts combined, basically equaling up to like $4 or $5 million, which is what we were paying Josh Smith. So, Mike, I want to ask you, what do you think about what the hell? I just went through everything. I know that was a lot, and it was a little confusing. It's a little confusing to read, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, this entire team, in a matter of a week, is completely overhauled. We thought Weaver was going to be aggressive. There was inklings that they were trying to even trade up even higher. Give me your thoughts on what the hell just happened, because I've never seen this much Pistons news since they traded for Blake Griffin.
Yeah, legitimately.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was quite shocking, honestly, going in. That was just like a flurry of Pistons stuff coming in.
Yeah.
I thought before all of this would happen that they weren't going to do much of anything and just kind of like sit still and go, we'll wait a year, wait until the big free agents come out, and then see what we can do then. But they went in, they said, you know what, we're going to overhaul everybody, we're going to draft our prospects, and we're just going to roll with it. And honestly, I don't hate it.
No.
I like a lot of the people that they end up getting. Jeremy Grant from the Nuggets, it's by far my favorite one because watching him in the conference finals, he really balled out defensively and offensively against the Lakers. He was probably the third piece to that Nuggets
down
team.
The exact same deal from Denver. So there's obviously a promise from Detroit that he's going to have a much bigger offense. He's going to be a starter.
Yeah, I'm assuming that he will be here, and he might even be the guy to kind of replace Blake Griffin if he is not in the future plans because he's getting up there in age. Not directly, but like in like 2 or 3 years, since he did sign 3 years. Probably that second, third year, he's probably going to be like, yeah, you're probably going to be starter 6th man at the worst now.
I think he's going to be the starting power forward. I think honestly, I think your starting 5 is going to be weird because I think honestly it's going to be Rose and then name maybe Josh Jackson, maybe that the other guy, the shooting guard from that they traded for. What's his name again? I just missed it. What's his name? DeLon Wright, or Svi Machulia, whatever the 3-point shooter. Blake Griffin, Jeremy Grant, and probably Mason Plumlee. I think that's probably going to be your starting five.
Something like that. Maybe Sekou gets in there somewhere. Who knows? But yeah, so I really like most of the moves that they made. I think you have actually good depth on the bench now too, because you can have Haynes coming off the bench now and have a great bench, 12, 14 minutes off the bench stuff. Right. I think everything was pretty good. I don't really have much complaints.
I have 2 complaints. My first one is the Mason Plumlee signing. I don't get the amount of money they paid him. 3 years, $25 million. He's a backup center at best. You know, he played for Denver once again, so they basically just signed the backup front court for Nuggets.
Basically, yeah.
I don't really get that signing, just because I don't really see where it helps you, I guess, is my thing. You know, Christian Wood, younger. I know he was going to be more expensive, and you know, with a 3-year, $41 million deal, I didn't know if they wanted to go that high for Christian Wood. That was the only, I think, questionable signing for me. Jahlil Okafor is going to be depth off the bench. I like taking a risk on Josh Jackson on a 2-year deal. I really appreciate the fact, though, that they didn't sign anybody like a max deal. They didn't sign Fred VanVleet for $100 million, thank God, right? They didn't go and make Gordon Hayward even more richer for doing absolutely nothing, because he's going to play 12 games and get hurt again. They didn't do anything like that, or they didn't pay Marcus Morris, or Markieff Morris, whichever Morris brother, got 4 years, $64 million from the Clippers. Marcus Morris, thank you. Like, that's insane to me. So I don't feel like they necessarily dug themselves in too big a hole. Everything is 3 years or less, so you're clearly seeing that, like, all right, we're gonna get this team to a position where we're gonna at least be competitive. They're not gonna be very good. Let's be clear. They're not gonna be good. I don't think they're gonna be really in it for an 8th seed necessarily at this point. But I think that they're going to be a lot more fun to watch because you're going to see a lot of young guys get a lot of meaningful minutes, which I think will be nice. The other thing I don't really like, but I understand it, is the wave and stretch. You just got out of that hole. I'm not a big fan of carrying tons of dead cap. The Lions are a huge, egregious person to do that in the NFL, where we've got like $12 million in dead cap right now from guys they trade away, or they'll take. It drives me insane. The Wings, for so long, were in the same situation. So I'm not a big fan of the wave and stretch. I get it, to get some of these assets to make these moves work. I honestly think there may be one more move or two. I don't know if it's going to be big or not. I've heard rumblings still. I'm still seeing some things where there could be they're still maybe looking at Russell Westbrook, which I think would kind of derail everything that they just did in a lot of aspects. But I'm happy. I can appreciate the fact that they were aggressive in the draft, which we've never seen, quite frankly. And 2, that they have a plan. It's a very, and people are like, I don't know what the plan is. I know what the plan is, at least off paper. They're going to be a very defensive, sound team that's going to get a lot of young guys a lot of playing minutes, is what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. And they are going to allow this team to grow with the core. Like, Killian Hayes is your point guard of the future. They're banking on that. They're banking on Sekou developing. They're banking on, Blake to get whatever left they have out of Blake Griffin before they turn it over to these young guys. I mean, you've got 4 guys right now in Stewart, Hayes, Sekou, and Sadiq Bey. 4 guys that you are hoping are going to be pillars for your franchise going forward. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So that's where I'm excited, and I'm excited that there's actually a plan. Mm-hmm. Whether it works or not, you can argue, but there's a plan. And and when's the last time we were able to say that? Like, we're in a full rebuild now. They gave away pretty much everything they could. They got rid of bad deals. They got rid of guys that could maybe help them win more right now, but would take away minutes later. And he's rebuilding the team in his image. Mm-hmm. So I can appreciate that. And you've got a guy in Dwayne Casey who can develop young kids, who is a defensive-minded guy. They're going to slow it down when they're on defense. And I think it's going to be fun to watch, to see this development with a couple veterans like Rose and Griffin kind of leading the way.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm actually excited to watch.
I think it's just going to be worth to watch. I think it's just going to be worth to watch them, just to see what it is, right? Because like for the last couple of years, it just feels like, all right, like Derrick Rose is fun to watch because it was nice to see him have a bit of a resurgence. But let's be real, this team before this was no better than maybe a 7th seed, and that's if everything goes right. So to have the opportunity to see some of these younger kids grow and turn into something, that's exciting. Because right now, if you're the Pistons, you're not going to be in the way. You're not going to be in that market for Giannis. You're not going to be in that market for an Anthony Davis or any of those guys. They're not coming to Detroit. Nobody wants to come here. So they have to draft well, and they have to make these sign and trades in order to get the pieces necessary to be competitive. So very exciting. Let's shift now from the Pistons, though, just to the NBA as a whole here. Give me your biggest shock move, whether it's a draft pick, whether it's a signing. I mean, because it's all condensed, right? So we got NBA overload this week. It's, okay, the league starts, so trades can happen, kind of, but not really. Then the draft, then free agency. Now everything becomes official, and everybody has a small NBA gasm.
Mm-hmm. It was a small NBA gasm, 100%. My big shock move was Montrezl Harrell to the Lakers.
Yeah.
Not even because I watch the Lakers all the time now, but just because that was the last name I would expect the Clippers to lose.
Yeah,
especially
sixth man of the year.
Yeah, sixth man of the year, and I didn't think that they would lose him, and especially to the Lakers. If he would have went to the Hawks or any of the Bulls or something, I would be like, okay, so you just lost him because you want to get paid more over here, but he just went, no, I'm just going to take my talent to the Lakers now.
Right.
He literally just moved over to the Lakers.
Took less money too. He's their mid-level exception, I believe.
Yeah, he is. So I think that was for me, that and the Rajon Rondo to the Hawks and not to a contending team necessarily were my two I definitely did not see that coming. Most of the moves so far I've kind of seen around the horizon coming. But
I think the one thing for me too is the Gordon Hayward one. Not the fact that he's gone out of Boston, but the fact that he went to the Hornets.
Yeah.
I think that's just I think Gordon Hayward has reserved himself to be like, maybe my Jazz years were my best years and I don't have that anymore, so I'm just going to go by name and just go to the worst team that will pay me the most money.
Yeah.
Because the Hornets aren't in contention by any stretch of the imagination right now. I like the ball pick, don't get me wrong, but they're not competing anytime soon. So with Gordon Hayward, they will be better, especially if he's healthy, but that's a lot of money for a guy who's played 12 games in 3 years. Mm-hmm. So that was a big one to me. Are you surprised that Harden or Westbrook didn't get traded?
A little bit, but I do think it's coming eventually.
Right.
Within the next 2-3 weeks, I'm assuming it will happen.
Yeah.
I honestly, I think there's going to be a point, though, where if it doesn't happen, it might not happen until the seasons, or the trade deadline.
Right.
Because I don't think teams, if it doesn't happen by, say, December 1st, because the season starts on the 22nd, teams are going to be like, I don't want to trade you, have you for a week or two to try to get you in, and then have you for the first game. I think you want to have it early enough, or it's we're just going to roll with the guys we have right now.
And if we feel like we're making a run, now's the time to grab this guy. Yeah, because Brooklyn has stayed kind of quiet. They signed that one guard for a bunch of money, right? Brooklyn hasn't done a whole lot. The Warriors trade for Kelly Oubre, which is fine.
The Bucks got Drew Holiday.
Okay, can we talk about that trade for a second there? What are the Bucks doing? I like Drew Holiday. I do. I like him. But that's a lot. Yeah. And I'm assuming then they have a promise from Giannis that he's staying.
I think
you do not mortgage that was a lot of draft capital.
I think they basically got Giannis to sign it. Basically, it was basically
if we're gonna do this,
you're staying.
You're staying, because if not, we're totally screwed for the next.
Because I think in hindsight, if he does sign, I think it's great because you have Drew Holiday and Giannis there. Yeah, that's a great one too.
Yeah.
But I do think that if he somehow
and Middleton's still there.
Yeah, and Middleton. Yeah. But if it was he's gonna dip to Miami,
if he's gonna go next year,
then you're absolutely screwed.
No sense.
So I think Giannis. I think that's basically a big red dot that's saying Giannis is staying in Milwaukee, which definitely makes next year's free agency way less interesting if he does stay. Because
there's always a thought. You never know. Dwight Howard said he was staying in Orlando all year, and then all of a sudden, I'm gone. Another one I want to talk about, just give a quick shout here, is to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They've got legitimately
first-round picks
first-round picks, I think, for the next 30 years. Like, they've got, like, multiple first-round picks.
The crazy thing is, they're actually, like, good, too.
Yeah.
So they're good.
Chris Paul's gone. That's another big trade, too. Chris Paul going to the Suns, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we talked about that a little bit last week as well, but... Steven Adams is gone now. He's in New Orleans, which I think is going to help Zion actually quite a bit. I think it'll let Zion to kind of float a little bit, not have to be a traditional center. But, I mean, Oklahoma City, if you're a team that if you're like, listen, we're not very good right now, but man, I mean, the future could not be brighter if you're Oklahoma City. You've got draft picks, literally. You've got, I think they've got at least 2 first-round draft picks for the next, 7 years.
Yeah.
At least.
Yeah.
So that is insane. If you just got to hit on half of that, I think you're going to be pretty good. So that is pretty crazy in itself, too. You're seeing these difference of philosophy. You're seeing Houston basically tear it down, but then the Christian Wood thing makes no sense to me because it's like, by the time you're competitive again, if they get rid of Harden or Westbrook, they're no longer competitive. So it's like, it's weird to see him go there because you don't have any draft capital because you had to give away most of it to get under caps for people to take bad contracts that you signed. And now you're going to get rid of Westbrook, who you gave up more capital to get in the first place. Harden wants out, and yet you're signing an up-and-coming player like Wood to a 3-year deal, knowing that by the time you're competitive again, he's probably going to leave. Mm-hmm. It's a weird... You've seen teams that we talked about at the beginning of last year that were like, oh, they're trying to make a run, and immediately go, nope, never mind, screw it, we're out, and take a complete 180. Mm-hmm. Is there a team for you that you're surprised didn't do more or didn't drop, or you're like, what are you waiting for? What are you doing? Or are you just waiting for the hammer to finally kind of drop for a team? You can't say the Pistons. The Pistons have been the most active team.
No,
in the league.
The Clippers.
Yeah,
I'm just sitting here waiting.
I teed that up for you pretty good.
You did. Yeah, it's. I mean, I was like, it's like you said. I said it's them and the Nets really are the two teams where I get like you guys are big powerhouses, and the Nets are probably going to be the favorites maybe in the East with the Bucks. Probably it'll be like a 1A 1B thing there.
The East is going to be fun.
Yeah, the East is going to be a lot of fun with very competitive. Yeah. But the West, I was thinking about it earlier, like right before I came here, and I was like, so you have the Lakers who are pretty dominantly going to be the favorites this year, and then you go, because now that Clay got hurt and the Clippers aren't doing anything, like Clippers are sitting there after getting eliminated in the second round and not doing anything.
They didn't improve your coaching staff. Tyronn Lue.
Yeah. Let's go. And then the Nuggets got rid of pieces that were helping to win, and then Houston wants to get rid of Harden and Westbrook. I'm like, why is the West all of a sudden is just like
weird
coming down way more than I thought it ever would. Mm-hmm. And it really comes down to what are the Clippers doing, because I think the Clippers are a team that can get 1 or 2 pieces and be like, all right, it's us versus Lakers. Mm-hmm. It will be us versus Lakers because how bad the West is. But now I'm like, the Rockets could just upset them if they keep Westbrook and Harden because they're not doing anything. They're not getting better right now.
There's a lot of teams out there right now that are younger. I think Denver's just kind of biding their time.
Yeah, Dallas?
Dallas
would just
I think Dallas is all of a sudden looking at like, man, we can make a run for a 3.
Yeah, we could get a 3-4 seed, and we could probably get to the Western Conference Finals and play the Lakers. Maybe probably lose, but we could get there.
Yeah, right.
And have a chance.
Porzingis can stay healthy. Yeah, that's a big key for them. And the East, like I look at the Boston Celtics too, and I go, "What are you guys doing?"
Yeah,
that window I think is closed. Quite frankly, I think because great, you've got numbnuts there. What's his name? I can't.
Tatum.
Tatum. Thank you. You got him. You got Jaylen Brown. You got Kemba. But like.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You get rid. It's just
they would have benefited from the Christian Wood signing.
Yes, they would have. And what's funny too is they tried to trade up and do some things. They're trying to clear space. I think they're trying to clear space either for Westbrook or for Harden or something like that. I don't think that's going to happen. Their draft picks have been uninspiring to say the least. And also, when you look at it and you go, okay, Gordon Hayward was a total flop in Boston. And you can say that, and that's like now you're like. Ooh, I don't even know if you're the third best team in the East anymore, because I think the Heat's there. I think you've got Milwaukee's there, and I think you've got the Nets there. Toronto's still better. Existing. I know they lost a couple pieces, but Fred VanVleet's back.
And I think you're on the level with the Sixers.
Yeah, probably. Which the 76ers are clearly trying to
because Simmons and Embiid, I'm like, those two together can just, if they stay healthy, are very good together.
Right.
So.
But they got rid of like Al Horford. They got rid of him now too. So there's there's a lot of movement that happened in this offseason in a very short amount of time.
They traded a lot for Danny Green. So they were like, Danny Green's the guy.
Yeah. I think it was more to get Al Horford's contract
probably
off the books more than it was for Danny Green. Because it was like, can you take... That's the thing about the NBA that I think is crazy, is that the NBA is willing to... like, GMs are like, we need this money off of our books immediately, and we'll do a lot to get rid of this money.
We will take a 55-year-old man.
Yeah, we're going to take a blind guy, ham sandwich, and a fan in order for you to take this $40 million contract. And people go, okay, and that's why I thought the Pistons could have really been in good position to do something like that because of that. Another team that I want to hit on just real quick before we move on are the Knicks. You know, the Knicks right now, they kind of just, I'm surprised they haven't done something Knickish, I guess is the best way of putting that, where they went and tried to sign a Gordon Hayward for a bunch of money. Could this be a sign that maybe they have people in charge that finally know what the hell they're doing?
I think the Knicks are in where I thought the Pistons were gonna be, where they're like, let's just wait this year.
They signed Nerlens Noel for 1 year, $5 million deal, which... Okay,
No, they're just kind of like, let's just kind of sit and wait and see what we can do maybe next year and maybe get another high draft pick. And
I think they're waiting.
Like, they're just kind of in the waiting game right now because they're like, once they saw the Pistons start making moves and you look at the East, like we just said, it's like, we probably won't be competitive at least this year.
Right.
So it's like, let's just wait and see kind of thing. And
very interesting, for sure. It looks like our camera dead. All right, this is going to be a videoless episode apparently today. That's fine. We'll just keep going then. But it's just, this NBA whole season has just been crazy in so many ways.
December 22nd, it's going to be
nuts. We're a month away. As of this recording, we're a month
Yeah.
away. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting for sure. It's one of those things to where if you're a Pistons fan, I think if you've been clamoring for a rebuild, you kind of got it pretty quickly 100%. Here. I mean, they literally tore apart the entire roster. And if you're somebody who wants them to compete, I think you're also somebody who's like, okay, let's go, because I think you've got pieces now. They're not competing for a championship, but there's a vision. And you're going to see what this team looks like. You're going to see how they do it. I still think, once again, there's a move or two left to be made. I don't know if they go splashy with it necessarily, but I think they need more shooting somehow still. I still think that they need something else, but I don't know what that is necessarily, but I think they need at least one more guard, I guess is the best way of putting that. But it's going to be interesting nonetheless. All right, let's talk, what else we got to talk about Michigan football. I got all discombobulated here.
A few more things. But Michigan football. Yeah,
Michigan football here. Michigan wins against Rutgers, barely, after an abysmal performance in the first half. McNamara's the new guy. I think we all look a little stupid right now talking about how well Joe Milton played week 1.
Hey, I was not on that boat. I said, I need to see you against a good team, and then Michigan State showed up, and I said, oh, wait, that's what you are.
Yeah. So it looks like McNamara is going to be the guy. I don't see Milton taking over, obviously, at this point. Goes to show you, I don't know what they saw then between Milton and McCaffrey. Clearly they thought Milton was better. Clearly Milton had to have done something better than McCaffrey to make them have the confidence that he was the guy. But if McNamara's the guy, which he beat Rutgers, I know Rutgers is a little bit better now than they've been in years past, but I'm going to still hold my expectations based off the fact that they're also 1-3 going into this game. So, you look at this, the quarterback change. I mean, give me your thoughts on where Michigan's at. Are you still in favor of Harbaugh getting fired? I know a lot of Michigan fans. My entire family is Michigan fans. They all want him gone. Yeah. And my argument still is who are you going to get? And they're like, anybody at this point. I'm like, okay, well, we saw anybody, and it.
Yeah,
and it
do you want Brady Hoke to come back?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, my uncle's excuse is, well, they won the, they played pretty well at Brady Hoke for the first year. I'm like, okay, great. They had one season where they won the Sugar Bowl against Virginia Tech with a quarterback who now plays tight end for the Washington Redskins. Let's calm it down a little bit here on that. I get it. You're not playing well. I think that if Harbaugh would to stay, I think they need to basically fire everybody on their coaching staff. But give me your thoughts just on Michigan as a whole. The quarterback change. Do you like the kid? Do you not like the kid? It's hard not to like him after the performance, but for future, I mean...
Yeah, no, I think the kid looked really, really good, and I'm a big fan of him, and I'm just going to say, because Kyle liked Joe Milton so much, so I'm going to be like, I'm on this kid train. I don't even know how to say his last name.
McNamara?
McNamara? Sure.
Yeah.
We'll roll with that. But I'm gonna roll with McNamara now. He's gonna be my guy. So when he's better than Milton,
okay, so I'm gonna take the third guy that comes in.
Yeah, you're gonna take the guy when McNamara throws 4 interceptions next week. You're gonna take the third string guy who comes in. That's fine.
And that's the thing that's funny though. It's hard because I think we were both on the train though. Let's give Milton some time here, And I made that argument last week when they were playing Wisconsin. I'm like, listen, this kid hasn't played in 2 years. It's like, oh, he should be ready. And the argument is made, well, how come every other team can do it? I think Michigan fans a little bit. I don't know if you're with me on this. I think need to take a step back for a second and understand that where you think you are and where you actually are as far as college football hierarchy is not the same. Mm-hmm. I think Michigan fan, and now it's one thing to expect that you want to be good and you expect to be competitive. That's fine. But when people say the phrase, well, this is Michigan and the expectation was that we need to compete for national championship. I hate to break it to Michigan fans a little bit, but you haven't been competing for national championships since like 2004. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit. I get Harbaugh came in with all the hoopla and he hasn't won the big games. I get that, but if we're looking historically, Michigan hasn't won big games at all, no matter who was the coach in the last 20 years. Historically, I think their last really big win was over a Tim Tebow-led Florida Gator team. So like the last Rose Bowl, they played USC. They got destroyed in. They haven't won a bowl game, or a meaningful bowl game in a long time outside of that Sugar Bowl, which I'm going to put, I guess that's a meaningful win, I guess. Mm-hmm. So I think that Michigan fans thought that when Harbaugh was, and I get it, we're in year 5 or 6, but I guess I just don't understand why Michigan fans, I don't know if it's just because a lot of them are older and they were during the Gary Moeller years where they were really good and they were able to ground and pound and kill people, where like we haven't been that in a very long time. Yeah. And you're not Alabama. Mm-hmm. You're not even now Clemson. You're not Ohio State. Now you need to try to replicate whatever the hell they're trying to do, but you're not doing that, and you haven't been that in a very long time. Mm-hmm. We need to stop thinking about them as the 1980-1990 Michigan. We'll look at them as they are right now, which is a above-average college football program.
See, I think it's hard because I think you have spurts of
where you look really good. Yeah.
Like 2016 Wolverines.
Yeah.
Like outside of getting they weren't even blown out that year by Ohio State. That was the
spot.
That was the spot game where you lost in like double overtime.
Yeah.
Like you look at that team and you go, but then how did the next year you go like 8-5 or whatever?
Right.
Like you just lose it all in 1 year and you get destroyed every other year since then. Right. I think that's the problem that you look at and even the 2018 Wolverines, you go into that game at number 3 or 4 in the country,
right,
and then you lose like by 65 points or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing that's annoying people is that you go in, you're like, yo, like we have had stretches where like we're like the best team in college football, and then it turns out not. And I think people looked at this year, they're like, Milton should be the guy. This should be.
He should be ready.
They should be ready. This should be the team. Yeah. And when it definitely blows up in your face, and none of that was correct at all, mm-hmm. I think that's where everyone's getting
I get the frustration, and once again, if they fire Harbaugh, I'm not going to be mad necessarily, mm-hmm. right? There just better be a plan, and you make the comparisons between this and the Lions where, I'm very much in favor of firing Matt Patricia today, even, I don't care, but at this point, it's one of those things where I think the expectations, I think, and the way they're brought in, I think, are just a little bit different, because Harbaugh, whether you want to give him credit or not, he did turn around the program. Mm-hmm. I mean, Brady Hoke was here. You're a 4-win football team. He turned it around, right? And you can say, okay, there were Brady Hoke players. Whatever. Fine. They were winning. And they've consistently won 8 to 9 games pretty much the good majority of the time that he's here. Now, is that national championship? No, it's not. And do they need to get there? Yes, they do. But I think we're looking back on some of these other coaches, like the last 10 years didn't happen, and Rich Rod and Brady Hoke wasn't a total disaster. Mm-hmm. So, whether they fire him or not, I'm not going to be overly exuberant or not, unless Urban Meyer's coming here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's just one of those things to where I think we need to kind of frame it a little bit better. The Milton thing, I think, is probably his biggest blemish in not being able to find a quarterback, honestly. Yeah. I think that's the number one biggest blemish. And we talked about this a little bit in my interview with Mr. Wooley, is that I feel like Michigan doesn't have an identity right now. Defensively, they can't do what they want. They can't rush the passer as well as they wanted to, and they can't play coverage. Offensively, they want to be a spread offense, but they can't do it because they don't have the players to do it. They don't have enough speed, it doesn't feel like. They don't have enough separation, or just the scheme isn't working. But they also kind of want to be a power run team with this weird like offset eye, but he's also in the shot. It's like this weird pistol offset thing that they're running. So it's weird. I just don't feel like they know who they are anymore. They're not the ground and pound team that we thought we were going to see, which we did see for the first couple of years here. And they're not a high-flying, explosive offense, which I think is what they need to be in order to compete. And yet, we're kind of getting a mishmash of everything, and it looks gross.
Yeah, no, I do think that they're in a dilemma of, do we want to be grounded? Like, they want to be ground and pound.
That's Michigan football.
That's Michigan football.
Yeah.
The problem is the best team in the Big Ten, and really the best teams in general in college football, are air raid spread offenses. Right. And so they're like, we can't compete ground and pound with their space in their air game.
Right.
So then it's like, now we got to kind of shift in. Alabama had that same problem, but was able to transition fluently and without really any hiccup, because they were able to just like get Tua and get these people that could just throw effortlessly. Right. But they had a stretch where they were like ground and pound. Then they played Clemson and Deshaun Watson. They said, yo, this kid just spreads the ball out and throws it. So now we got to do that. So then they got Tua Tagovailoa, and then they were like, all right, now we're spread. And then they go win a national championship because they can actually spread out and pass. Right. And so Michigan's having that problem with the transition of, we used to be ground and pound, but we need to find that quarterback that can air raid, and they can't get the quarterback right.
And I think they thought no one was that guy, and I think they did. You see the athleticism out of the kid. You do. He's an athletic freak. He really is. But the little nuances, I think, to quarterbacking, I think, are still a little bit lost on him. I also think, though, they're doing this kid a little bit of a disservice. Now, McNamara came in, he played a great game. I'm interested to see him play. They play Penn State next week? Is that who they play? I want to see him play Penn State. I know Penn State, everyone's saying they're not very good, but they're going to be a bigger challenge than Rutgers. Let's just be real here. So, at the same time, I want to see what he looks like for a full game. We're once again back at the same notion of, until I see something different, I'm not going to get overly excited. Yeah. But I'm just going to caution people. Everyone says it's a crapshoot when you're hiring a new coach, and that's fine. But just be aware that there's just a high possibility of this guy turning around the program as it is that the program burns into flames. Yeah. So I get it. You're not happy being 2-3. I get the fact that you're not thrilled with the way Harbaugh's playing and the expectations that came along with him. That's fine. But historically, he's no different than any other Michigan head coach. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. It makes me laugh a little bit. Is really the end of it. But it is what it is. But we're interested to see where it goes. Obviously, if Harbaugh gets fired, we'll see what happens. I honestly think what'll more than likely, I think he just fires all of his coordinators, quite frankly. I think he just needs to go steal Ohio State's offensive coordinator. I know Numbnuts is still calling plays over there, but get the guy underneath Ryan Day. Go hire whoever's the defensive coordinator out of Bama or whatever. Or the defensive somebody else other than what the hell we got going on now. Because I think that's the biggest flaw right now, is that you have no identity on defense or offense anymore, because the things that you were good at, you can't do with the kids you have. Yeah. So I think that they're very much in a I don't know what to do kind of scenario. So I think it's hard to win no matter what. Let's shift now a little bit here. I want to talk about, we talked last week about Survivor Series, and that's going to be, obviously, by the time you're hearing this, it'll be last night. But it is the 30th anniversary of The Undertaker, and we talked a little bit about Taker last week. Is he going to be that? He's not going to be the last guy on Survivor Series team now.
So unfortunate.
Otis or Big E or whoever it is. I don't even know. Is it Otis?
Yeah, it's Otis.
Oh, sure. Why not? Shows how much I'm paying attention.
Same.
But he is going to be there tonight. You've got a lot of the BSK crew. I mean, you got the Godwins coming back. Savio Vega is making an appearance. The Godfather, Rikishi. You got a lot of guys back in the time where I don't even, some people listening to this even know who the Godwins are. Do you know who the Godwins are? Nope. They used to be a tag team. Sure. They were farmers. They were,
I would believe you.
Former world champ.
You could tell me that they would come to the ring hanging upside down, sliding down a bar, and I would believe you.
They're former world tag team champions, in fact. But a lot of guys that rode with Taker, for a long time. Savio Vega is still wrestling now for MLW. We all know who the Godfather is, obviously. Of course. You know who the Godfather is. Come on, I was gonna say. So you're gonna see a lot of these guys here. First question I want to ask you is, do we get one more match out of him, or is it done? Because he's been doing a lot of interviews. He's like, never say never, but last thing he's really did was WrestleMania last year. He hasn't even been on TV. He's been doing so many appearances, which is awesome. Did you buy me one of his cameos for $1,000?
No, they sold out too fast. They sold out in like 20 minutes.
I know, it's crazy. But just talk to me about what, I mean, are we just going to see him come out and just be like, thank you, goodbye? Because I think they're going to save it for the main event.
Yeah, probably.
Or something like that, or right before, and I think an angle is going to happen.
I don't want it to, though.
But you want him just to be done. You want him to be done.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate to say now, but his matches are just so...
They're rough.
Rough to get through.
Yeah.
And I think if you're not going to have a big crowd, especially this year, like if you were telling me like 2 years from now, they would set up some match at WrestleMania in 2 years where you can have like a full crowd there or whatever, fine, maybe, I guess. But right now I'm like, I don't want it to be in front of a virtual crowd where he gets probably beat the last time, then he does the WrestleMania 33 thing where he like hangs up everything and walks out, but in front of virtual fans and no one's really there. Like that wouldn't be as impactful, really. No. So I think, and he doesn't want to do any cinematic matches anymore. Like he doesn't want to do another Boneyard kind of match. No. So if it's not going to be cinematic and it's not going to be in front of people, I don't want him to stay in front of electronic.
I think the people think it's the biggest.
Yeah, I don't want him to stay in front of 1,000 electronic faces or whatever, and then do his last like goodbye or whatever. I wanted it to be in front of people. Since you can't, I'm gonna say probably not, and I don't want to see one because of that reason.
Yeah, it's hard for me because I think that if they wanted to do something, they could. The problem is that I'm looking at with who. That's my biggest question is with who, because you don't have somebody right now. I don't want it to be a Kurt Angle versus Baron Corbin, even if they have fans. Right? Let's say by March. They're able to, because they're going to Tropicana Field anyway. They're going to try to have. They're doing what AEW is going to do. I think is try to have like a small amount of fans.
Yeah, they have 2,000 fans.
But if they're going to be able to do more than that in the next couple months, which I'm not saying they are with the coronavirus, I don't know. I can't predict that. But if they do, the only problem I have is with who. And I don't think you have somebody like Roman would be the perfect guy at this point where he's at character wise, but he's also the world champion. So you can't do that, right? The Undertaker is the only guy that I have ever said that should have gone out world champion. And my logic has always been the same, is that he is the most defining character in wrestling history, that he is the one guy where I think he's the only person I ever would have believed. And this probably would have been a little bit better a couple years ago if he would have done where he was a little more healthy. I think he's healthy now, as we watched in the Last Ride documentary. He's in much better health than he was a few years ago with Brock and everybody. But for him to go out, have one more match, wins the world title, puts it in the middle of the ring at the end of the night, and just walks out, and he leaves, as like the last guy from that era, I think would be awesome. Obviously, it's not going to happen, but I want to see it for nostalgia purposes because I do think that he could give us one last great story. But I just don't know with who. And because of that, I think that it should be better for him just to go out and be done.
I also think when you look back and you go, his last match was...
with AJ, and it was
AJ
great.
In the Boneyard match. Yeah. And he just goes out with, that match. It's yes, that is... Because in the Last Ride documentary, you said, I wanted to go out with that last match. So I was that was a great match. I think that was a great match.
It was, and... He's even said as the years get on, he's like, I get slower as the years go on. There's no doubt, right? I mean, dude, he's old. he's not 35 anymore. So, give me your favorite. Do you have a favorite Undertaker moment? Or a top one or two that, when you think of the Undertaker, what's the first thing you think of?
Well, okay. I think of the 4-match cycle between Shawn Michaels and Triple H, back-to-back Manias. Those 4 years. Are and I guess if you put it into one moment, probably the 28 one where he wins when the super kick
into the pedigree
and he kicks out, and then he ends up winning, and then they're all standing at the top. That whole segment of moments would probably be it. But just the 4 matches, you have all story. It's all story driven.
It's the only real time I've ever felt that he was going to lose before Brock. For me, when he faced Shawn, I didn't think Shawn was ever really going to beat him. No. I knew Shawn was coming to the end. The Triple H one was I can't believe they're actually going to give Triple H this win. Yeah. And because it was a super kick into a pedigree, I think it was onto a chair even.
I was think so.
Oh my gosh. That was the first time where I was like, whew. I got a little nervous there for a hot second. It's just one of those things where you're heart palpitations a little bit. But that's the one, those four men. I mean, that's hard to argue. I would say mine... it's weird because The Undertaker, when I was a little bit younger, he kind of made a resurgence, in that 2007 time frame, right? Where, 5, 6, 7, where he was like inactive, he was on the road, he was doing house shows, the whole 9 yards. So I think my defining moment for me as a fan, for me personally, is WrestleMania 23, because I was there. Seeing him win the world title, really stealing the show with Batista in a match I don't think a lot of people had a lot of hope for. It was going to be like a quote-unquote technical masterpiece. Really was, I think, the highlight of the show for me. I know Shawn and Cena had a pretty good match that night too, but I thought Taker and Batista was better just from a storytelling perspective. So seeing him win his first world championship in like 5 years was pretty awesome. But I think the quintessential moment for me is the fact that I think he is the only guy to cross over so long, and literally from the moment he stepped into the building, has always been a top guy. Like Survivor Series 1990, he was brought in as a dominant force. A year later to the day, he beats Hulk Hogan at if it's not a peak, it's pretty damn close to a peak of Hulkamania, and beats him for the world title. And then, and it's never to look back. The way he's been able to change characters, the fact that he has been able to do the things he's been able to do, the rivalries he's had. You look at the Kane rivalry as a whole, that spanned 20 years. Yeah. You look at, the stuff he did with Shawn, with Triple H, the stuff he did with Brett, basically from 94 to 97, the stuff he did with everybody. It's just, for me, he will go down as the greatest of all time from a character perspective and from a longevity. Like, I know Hogan and Flair, but there were times where they weren't top guys. The Undertaker, no matter what, even when he was hardcore champion, didn't matter. He was still a top guy and was always a threat and was always somebody where, oh my gosh, Undertaker's on the card, I want to watch because the Undertaker's on the card. And that, for me, that's why he's on my Mount Rushmore of the greatest of all time, and I think he's the first one up there because of that, is because we will never, ever, ever, ever in our lifetimes see another Undertaker. Never. It'll never happen. I don't care what anybody says. You're never going to see it. So for my money, you don't get any better than that. So I hope this whole farewell thing goes well. I still think there's an angle coming. I don't know what it's going to be. Or maybe, I just hope, I hope it's not, though. It's one of those, like, when DX would come out on a Raw, and then, like, a low job or bad guy comes out, and then everybody just takes their turn hitting their finish on him. I really hope that's not a thing. Like King Corbin comes out and he just choke slams his ass. Yeah. I really don't want that at all. So it's going to be interesting nonetheless. It'll be fun to watch. But to think that this is actually the closing of the chapter here is kind of crazy when you really think about it, because it's one of the things where WrestleMania is not the same without The Undertaker. It's just not. Whether you're a fan of him, whether you think he should have retired 12 years ago, it's just not the same. It's just not. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least. If there is an angle, obviously, we'll probably talk about it next week. If it's something stupid, we'll be bummed out about it. But
yeah, sounds right.
That's going to be it for this week's show. Next week, obviously, we'll give you guys, actually, first off, I want to say Happy Thanksgiving to everybody who's listening, because we won't hear from them until then. But we would really appreciate all the support over the last 2 years. This is the 2-year anniversary show, episode 104 for us. And to say thank you is an understatement. I want to say thank you to Mike, because without Mike being here, I wouldn't be able to do the show. It'd just be a lot of me talking more than I already do. Shut up. Okay, thank you to Kyle, who's not here right now. Thank you to Em. Thank you to everybody who's given us their support. These last years have been a lot of fun for both of us and for the whole crew here. We've made a lot of adjustments. We've made a lot of, we've done a lot of things. We've covered a lot here in 2 years. I think that's an understatement. We've moved studios. We've changed setups. We've done a lot of different things. We've added some things. We hope to have brought some sort of some levity to sports talk, because right now everybody's just so doom and gloom. So it's nice to be able to kind of break out a little bit and talk about something a little more positive. But on behalf of everybody here, thank you so much for the 2-year support. I hope that you guys continue to support the show. Please be sure to subscribe on any of the podcasting sites that you listen to podcasts on. Make sure you go to our YouTube page, I'm Always Right Sports Podcast. Look us up there. Give us a follow. We really appreciate it. And obviously buy our shirt at belowthecollar.com/I'm Always Right PC. But that's going to be it for the 2-year anniversary show. What better way to end the show than by talking a little bit of The Undertaker? I can't feel a better way to bookmark the end of 2 years than by talking about this. But on behalf of the Missing Whale Man, on behalf of the Merc Zone, on the mouth of Michigan, and we will see you guys, as always,